Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It's Monday, January 26th, 10:04 p.m. We're late, and we're going to talk about the next election cycle and all the bells and whistles that go along with it, including one of the largest disinformation campaigns that I think we have seen ever. A very quiet, subdued one for now, but it will pick up tempo as they have laid the groundwork for it. Part of which is now playing out in the shit show that is Minneapolis, and the extra shit show, which is the people that supposedly care about this young man who got himself shot the other day. You notice nobody seems to care about the woman who got shot 2 weeks ago, basically because she was unmarketable. This guy is a little bit more marketable. They'll get over the gun thing at some point, but still, it is what it is. So, what we're going to talk about is this sure thing the Democrats tell you they have, which is the midterm elections and how they're going to sweep through there and just really rock it. And as you see, certain amounts of the Republican Party, which is not, they're really just swamp creatures, and they are going to bail out or sell out or whatever they have to because it is all part of the electoral plan. So let's talk about what's really going on. This is a very good example of one of the asymmetrical warfare types that you can use. And I'll tell you, whoever puts these together for the other team is very good. Past masters of the game, as we would say. And let's just discuss what's going on. Where does the dominant political narrative actually fail? And who is it misreading? Okay. And we're going to talk about, first of all, the purpose of inevitability. Every election cycle has messaging. This one has something stronger. They use what's called inevitability framing. The idea isn't just to persuade you, it is to convince you that persuasion is no longer necessary. When voters are told repeatedly that an outcome is inevitable, three things are going to occur. Well, many, but three major things. First, supporters are going to feel morally validated without needing to argue. Okay. Second, opponents become demoralized and disengaged. And third, and most important, silence gets reinterpreted as agreement. So the socialists are number one. They feel morally validated because they are not part of the media blitz. They are just the foot soldiers of this deal. And second, the Republicans, to some extent, meaning the swamp types, the rhinos, and everything, are the ones that are demoralized and disengaging, along with a number of other voters who just don't get it or understand what's going on, or that this is life and death against socialism, which it is. And as I said, the third is the most important. The momentous silence is not agreement. That is not democracy in motion. It's called preference management. Look it up. The system doesn't need everyone to believe. It needs enough people to stop objecting publicly. So when they keep telling you the inevitability of a sweep in the midterm elections, or well, that guy's probably going to lose in midterm elections, or the Republicans are expected to lose 35 seats in the midterm elections, that's them just saying it. There's no real valid documentation that would go out there to give you that answer. It is true. Go take a statistics class, a real statistics class. That was one of the things I learned. A, they're not supposed to gamble because they know it doesn't help. And B, you can make it answer anything you want, but the variability that it becomes irrelevant occurs pretty fast. So if you're predicting now what's going to happen then, you're a joke. But it works when you have weak-willed people, which we have everywhere in the world. I'm a weak-willed person. We all are. Let's not kid ourselves. At some level, we are weak. We put up with things. But this is not something one wants to put up with. So where the narrative actually fails here is narrative dominance does work until it collides with lived reality. Now, failure point number one, public safety and disorder. When people experience crime directly, right, abstraction loses. They used to say, Republican, what was it? You're a Democrat until you get a victim of crime, then you become a Republican, or something to that effect. Pretty much so. Reframing statistics doesn't work when the problem has a face, a street, or is a victim. Narrative credibility collapses locally because it collapses, before it collapses nationally. Failure point number two: institutional opacity, an opaque institution. Any system that demands trust while resisting verification creates its own legitimacy crisis. There are a number of blue states right now that are fighting tooth and nail with the federal government to withhold their voting records or voting rolls from the federal government for inspection. They are using certain objections, which we'll get into a little bit later. They're not doing it. They're bad actors. They're not doing it in good faith. You don't have to believe misconduct is widespread to understand that refusing transparency increases suspicion. So when they're saying they're doing it because the federal government are a bunch of Nazis, what do you really think? Why wouldn't you tell them who's on the voter rolls? Most of the other states have done it. Only the holdout blue states, which are also the ones that are rife with this illegal immigration, sanctuary cities, and all this huge welfare abuse, right? So that's all occurring in the same spots. So that's what you have when we're talking about refusing transparency increases suspicion. If you're so innocent, why don't you let them see it, right? And we'll talk about that later as well. Failure point number three: performative extremity. These are all terms you should keep in mind because they are all coming from the same. We're talking fifth generation warfare all the time anymore when we discuss things that are occurring in the political realm. So the street theatrics, the radical language, the regime level rhetoric from the governors and the police chiefs and from the mayors, they are energizing a committed minority, the people that are delusional fantasists that believe you should carry a gun into a fight with armed federal agents, right? But they alarm the political middle. The same images that inflate perceived numbers also increase perceived instabilities. If somebody tells what we would call a Kennedy Democrat, which is pretty much a Reagan Republican, I think you could almost say at somewhat levels, that these people in the street barking like dogs, giving each other butt plug enemas, this and that and the other thing, saying they're going to murder. They're going to murder federal employees, not just the agents, anybody they can get their hands on. You start to say to yourself, is this the Democratic Party I joined 30 years ago, or my father or mother were in member of? Absolutely not. It's hardcore socialism, terrorist overtones, right? So you aren't going to say I'm leaving, but you may not attend all the events, right? And that is the thing. The mistake is assuming that fear equals support. That's how terrorism works. You scare them into not doing something, but they're going to need to scare you into doing something, which is to vote. And often in that time, fear will produce silence. That's why the counter protests aren't out there. You know, the voter block, everyone gets wrong. President Nixon used to talk about a silent majority, okay? And they are out there and they have never left. Now you see them as undeclared voters or people that are independents or things of that nature. And what we can say is, here's where your analysis is going to break on that. You have working class minority voters are often treated as ideologically progressive by default. Working means working class blacks or the Puerto Ricans, because they are minority, but they're American citizens, and anybody who's been naturalized that falls into the rainbow from there, including the Poles. In reality, many are culturally conservative. They are enforcement oriented. They want to have a police force that polices. They don't want to be involved in communism or socialism. They don't want somebody dragging them out of their house and beating the shit out of them on the idea that they may support the federal government. So when conditions deteriorate, they aren't going to be out there, banging on pots and pans with you guys, meaning the communists or the terrorists or both. They're not going to defect loudly, and they're probably not going to join the Republicans, but they are going to disengage. Now, you also have that with institutional Democrats, like I said, the Kennedy types, the older voters, the public sector workers, union households. They're assumed to be aligned with activist energy. That was an article he wrote, which is a total lie. They said they had a thing, I think it was on the 23rd, where all the unions were going to go out, and they were part of these labor councils. And in that labor council was the plumbers and the electricians union. Now, I personally contacted the electricians union by phone and by email, explained the situation to them, including a link to one of the sites that was promoting them. I didn't hear back, but I'm sure somebody heard something at that point, because the person I spoke to had no idea what the hell we were talking about. Because getting involved in this means your union is probably going to get shut out of federal programs in the future. Why would they go out of their way to have a union man on the job who's going to set fire to the place, right? So that is a situation that they don't want to have. These people are going to prioritize stability over transformation. They're doing okay, they're making their money. They go out and work every day, but they're making good money. You should see what union, I have no problem with the union. I think when it was eroded, especially in states like my state here of Florida, it was done specifically so these other idiots could have the slave labor that they then got, especially in the construction industry. Agriculture is a different story, but in the construction industry, guaranteed the trades were shut out for that reason. And they tried to blame it on organized crime, which it was not. That's my 2 cents on that. So that's what you have going on there. The silence, once again, is not that it's enthusiasm. They are risk management. They don't want to get into it because there could be some asshole mess with them at work, things like that. Okay, especially the public sector people. Now, low information or marginal voters aren't ideological at all. They respond to trust or salience, right? When institutions appear captured or dismissive, they don't switch teams, they just get out of the game. And here's the key point. The disengagement distorts turnout models. It creates the illusion of momentum right up until there isn't any. Just as Trump was going to lose the last election because it was in the bag, this is a version of that same psyop. Okay, which it is. That doesn't mean we're talking conspiracy talk. It is a campaign tactic, like voter nullification. You would put it where there's no reason for you to come out and stand in the line in the cold rain to vote because we are going to crush your candidate. That's what they're trying to get you to believe. That socialism with the murders that they're involved in, and before you say, oh, the ICE guys, who put those people in the position to get shot? They were intentionally put there by socialists because socialism needs bodies and martyrs to exist. That's how you keep your momentum going. Okay? And that kind of momentum is there until it's not there. So now you're talking here the core mechanism, which is called preference falsification. Once again, look it up. Keep it in mind. These things that we talk about are out there every day. And unfortunately, if you read any news, you're going to have to keep these terms in mind and see what's a lie and what's the truth. If you're a parent, don't let your kids read stupid shit. If you're a husband or wife, don't let your husband and wife read stupid shit. That's called protecting your family. One of the biggest dangers affecting the American family today is the pervasion of disinformation and total false narratives, because they have to hit you across the board. They're not happy telling you Trump's a maniac. They're telling you the sky is green. They're telling you that whatever, some ethnic group came up with ice cream that had no ice cream forever, right? Whatever the story is, they have to continue to bombard you with ridiculous non-facts so that you can perceive the truth, and the truth is a falsity. Does that sound very Dennis Hopperish? That's pretty much what's going on there. So people privately disagree. Publicly, they toe the line, right? Silence is misread as assent. And because would you want to go through Milwaukee right now? If you were a 70-year-old woman or man, or if you were a younger person by yourself, would you want to walk through one of these freaking open air zoos with all these communists running around making animal noises and throwing tear gas at each other and say, I don't believe in this shit. I don't like Waltz. I may not like Trump either, but I prefer to have a chance to vote on what I want. And I want law enforcement to protect me from you motherfuckers. You will get your head stomped. They will not allow it, especially since there are no police. They are the law. You saw them chase that guy down who they thought was a nice guy, and he was one of their own people. One of their own people, and they were whipping his ass because part of the perception that they are pushing is that all the ICE agents are white guys. Whereas Border Patrol and ICE, I would like to say more than half are probably some type of Spanish descent, because who the fuck's speaking all the illegals? There aren't that many proficient dual language speakers working in the federal government. It has to be somebody who was a native first speaker and speaks English as well. Put it out there. Tell me I'm wrong. All right. So just because they can't see your face, it's become that evil white male. The federal agents are the evil white male. They're the evil Trumpler. They're all that bullshit. Okay. So, as I said, the silence, which these people are saying is condoning the violence, they're just staying out of this. The majority appears larger than it does, right? What you're seeing isn't mass conviction as far as supporting these morons. It's synchronized personas, public agreement without private integration. That kind of consensus is very brittle. Okay. It holds until the cost of dissent drops, and then it breaks abruptly. And that's why certain elections looked shocking to the commentators, even though the conditions were visible for years. The failure isn't prediction, it's misdiagnosis. There is a very good chance the more they tell you that the Democrats are going to seize control in the midterms, that the Democrats do not seize control in the midterms. Very good chance of that. Because why are they saying, the greatest thing about the voting booth, you go in there, you vote for whoever you want. You walk out of the voting booth and there's a bunch of thugs there, then you say you voted for whoever they said you voted for. That's how it works. That is how it works. This whole telling people who you're voting for shit is a new experiment. A lot of it's probably pushed by when the Chinese had the influence in the Congress, which they still do. And we could talk about that another time as far as these influencers, these influencer channels, and why people care about somebody who's got 10 million viewers and he's got 500 views, but they talk about the 10 million viewers. If you have 500 views, you have 500 people watching you. And the 10 million means you were probably pushed up by bots or in these mutual assurance circles that you see that fanned out after the era of Joe Rogan before he jumped the shark. Okay. So back to what we're talking about. So why can't critics, or why critics avoid substance? Why do they avoid substance? Why are they going to just tell you they're going to win, and they're not going to tell you how they're going to win? Are they going to say, we're going to win as Democrats because we are going to reinforce Somaliland corruption in Milwaukee? We're going to bring back child molesters. People, it is a very truism. The people in the street are fighting to keep child molesters and criminals in the United States. They say, well, they hit a work site. You got to do what you got to do because you've made it impossible to do the regular job. These guys have a quota, right? That's not true, but I'm saying it. They got to do what they got to do. And plus, some of these guys are on work sites. Don't kid yourself, right? Murderers do other things other than murder, unless you're in Mexico. So, as I said, questioning the narratives is going to be an issue. You're going to say, how challenges to this analysis are usually answered when people are critical. They don't give you data. They're going to give you moral framing because we're winning, because Trump's a Nazi, not with rebuttal, but with an accusation. Well, why are you asking? Are you also a Nazi? Questioning narratives becomes dangerous. We beat Nazis up. Asking for verification becomes suppression. Pretty obvious. Disagreement becomes harm. If you disagree and there's enough of us there, we're going to whip your ass, right? That's what socialism does. It's not a mystery. They've done the same thing everywhere that they've operated. That tells you something important. It shows the system is defending legitimacy by authority rather than by persuasion. Okay. That works only while trust remains hot, reserves remain high. Now we can see, I think that you're going to see much more of a trustworthy crew behind the current administration, which is law and order, than you do amongst the people in a place like Minnesota. So once those reserves are depleted, where the people in Minnesota are like, well, the governor has always been nice to us and we don't really know about all this crime, that could just be a fake, then you're going to get an enforcement without consent, and that is going to accelerate the backlash where people are going to walk away from Mr. Walz and his friends in Milwaukee. I know this is starting to sound like a freaking science project, and I'm sorry. I should have broken it down a little bit further. But the idea is this: you're being hit with very well crafted narratives, constantly bombarded at multiple levels to try to make you think that either A, you should be on the side with Walz and the rest of these scumbags and the socialists, or B, you better shut up about whatever you're doing and just let it run through. But it will never be C, which is do the right thing and vote your conscience. Now, if your conscience says that you want to be a socialist, that's fine. If you've always been a socialist, then do it. I don't want to hear about it. Nobody should hear about who you voted for, but we have to clear the rolls. The rolls have to be cleared so you know that you did vote your conscience and you didn't vote the conscience of 75,000 dead people in a trailer park somewhere, right? That's the big issue. So basically, like I said, this is what's going on. You've got to not fall for the bullshit. If you are interested in the president continuing to do what he's doing, the people that are going to be running in the midterm are necessary to keep that going if you are on the Republican side. If by any chance there is a primary coming up, like for Massey, or it should be for Rand Paul and a couple of the other guys, you have to realize that they are not Republicans. They're Republicans in name only. Anybody who tells you they're a libertarian and is actually running as a Republican is a piece of shit liar. Okay. Libertarian politics do not work at the federal level. They do not work at the federal level. They can work in the town or the village or all that stuff, but they cannot work federally. So just tell people to stop lying to me. Tell me what you really are. And you will find that you don't have to wear a shirt. You don't have to do a bumper sticker. You don't have to do anything. You just have to show up to midterm and vote down socialism. Because once it's in, everything that you know about the United States government goes away. And could be you and your family as well. That's how it works. If you want to understand a little bit more about it, why don't you look up the Khmer Rouge? They're my favorites for that, because a lot of the nonsense that occurred with the anti-intellectual, meaning intelligence, anti-intelligence movement, we can say, not intellectuals. The intellectuals are the problem. You will see occurred in Khmer Rouge, which is thinking was bad. We must destroy thinking, and we will live an agrarian lifestyle, and everything will be great. These socialists that we have wish to have majority of the people think like that, and then some that are still trying to strive to make their life worthwhile, they will become the slaves with which the money that we steal from them will run the massive welfare system that we will have in the United States, basically. But that will be a rule by elites. It will not be a true communist or socialist system. Depends who you talk to, but that's basically how it always ends up. So if there's any questions, there's probably a lot. I'm sorry about that, but there's a lot of terminology that I think you should go back and look at, because that's what you're being hit with now. You're going to be hit with the A grade game stuff now. As we're exposing more and more of the cancer in the United States, you're going to have to realize that they have to bring in the A game. Like Jill Biden's coming out. Well, first of all, who gives a shit? Bill Clinton's writing letters. Well, why doesn't he go to court? You know, he's a ducking and dodging a subpoena in the Senate because he knows Jeffrey Epstein. He knows that some people have a feeling that Jeffrey Epstein put together the Clinton Foundation for him. That's been said by other people. Some people make a pretty good argument for a lot of that, but he was stony broke when he left office, and he is no longer stony broke, which would also make you wonder about Barack Obama, who, when he left office, was worth millions of dollars, and when he went in, he wasn't worth shit. That's why he was given that Nobel Prize. That was a taste, and then he just moved on from there. So these are all not conspiracy things. Before you say, oh, I don't believe this, it's not conspiracy. It isn't. These are all clearly open things that you can talk about. But I want you to just think a little bit more, because it's come to that time. You don't have to listen. You don't have to argue. I don't want you arguing with people. You go home, you talk to your husband and wife or your kids. It's the same thing as you would with a child molester. Say, hey, kids, you don't go to any secret class where they're going to talk to you about sex or what the politics really should be, things like that. That's not for there. That's for home. Mom and dad are going to go through that with you, right? And you're going to see the same thing at work. They're going to ask people to do certain things, and you just be half-ass about it. You know, if you have to, where I worked at one point where if you would put up anything remotely Republican, you would have been fired somehow. Even if you were necessary, you would have been fired. So if somebody asked you to put up something, you put it up. Lucky I was in an office where nobody gave a fuck about anything, so we didn't have too much to put up in the first place, but we would have been up to our ears. We had the gay stuff, we had a couple other things, but you know, that was what you had to do to keep your job. That's different than on the street, you know? So anyway, drug it out too long. Sorry about that. Any other questions? Get a hold of us. Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, Substack. I'm doing Substack with same thing from the written stuff that's on South Florida Conservative. I just throw it over there as well. And we are out there whenever you need us. Goodbye. Have a good day.